My name is Sophia, and if you had told me a few years ago that my life would become the kind of story strangers gossip about online, I would have laughed in disbelief. I was once an ordinary mother, a woman who thought family meant love, loyalty, and sacrifice. But one tragic day showed me that blood ties are not always bonds of love, they can sometimes be shackles of betrayal. I lost my only son, Daniel, when he was just 12 years old. A freak accident at school, a fall that caused a head injury, took him from me. I still remember the phone call, the panic, the desperate drive to the hospital, and then, the sterile white walls and the words that shattered my world. We're sorry. But we did everything we could. I don't think I breathed for several minutes after hearing that. My Daniel, my boy with the curious eyes and the laugh that could light up an entire room. Gone. Just like that. The days that followed were a blur of grief and arrangements. The funeral was the hardest day of my life. I expected my family to stand beside me, to hold me when I thought I might collapse, to cry with me as we lowered my child into the ground. But when I looked around, something inside me twisted painfully. My parents, his grandparents, weren't there. Neither was my sister, Claire. The people who should have been there to honor Daniel's life, to comfort me, decided to stay away. I stood at my son's grave with shaking hands, tears streaming down my face. And I felt abandoned. Afterward, I called my mother. My voice cracked as I asked, "Why weren't you there? He was your grandson." "My son." Her response was cold, almost dismissive. "Sophia, funerals are depressing. And besides, Claire's wedding is coming up. We can't drown ourselves in sadness right before something so important. You need to move on." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My child's death was an inconvenience to them. Something that clashed with their perfect little plans for Claire's big day. My heart didn't just break, it hardened. I hung up the phone, shaking with grief and rage. In that moment, I realized something brutal. My parents didn't just fail me, they chose to erase my son's memory, because it didn't fit their narrative of celebration and joy. At the funeral, I had promised Daniel one thing as I touched his small coffin before it was lowered. "I will never let anyone forget you. I will make sure justice is done." I didn't yet know what form that justice would take, but I felt the first spark of something that would later grow into fire. Weeks passed after Daniel's funeral. I was drowning in grief, barely functioning, but I was slowly starting to gather the broken pieces of my life. That's when my parents made their move. It started with a visit. My parents showed up at my house, dressed impeccably as always, smiles plastered on their faces as if nothing had happened. My father cleared his throat, avoiding eye contact, while my mother got straight to the point. "Sophia," she said smoothly, "we need to talk about Daniel's trust fund." My heart froze. Daniel's father, my late husband, had left behind a trust fund for our son. It was worth $850,000. Money meant to secure his future, his education, his dreams, his life. When Daniel passed, the fund legally transferred to me. I looked at my mother in disbelief. "What about it?" "Well," she said, as though it were the most natural request in the world, "Claire's wedding is very expensive. She deserves the best, don't you think? And with Daniel gone, he doesn't need that money anymore. It would be better used to fund her big day." I almost laughed, except it wasn't funny. It was monstrous. "You're asking me to take my dead son's trust fund and hand it over for Claire's wedding. Are you insane?" My father finally spoke up, his tone cold. "Think of it as honoring Daniel. He can't use the money, but his aunt can. It's still family." I felt bile rise in my throat. "Family? You didn't even show up to his funeral. You left me to bury him alone. And now you want his money to throw a party." My mother waved her hand as if brushing away my anger. "Sophia, you're being dramatic. Claire is alive. She's getting married. Life has to go on." That was the moment something inside me snapped. They had not only disrespected Daniel's memory, but now they wanted to profit from his death. I clenched my fists, holding back the urge to scream. I refused that day. I told them I would never, ever hand over Daniel's money. My parents stormed out, furious, but not before my mother hissed, "You'll regret this, Sophia. Don't ruin your sister's future out of spite." But I wasn't done. Their greed had lit a fire inside me. If they wanted Daniel's trust fund for Claire's wedding so badly, maybe it was time to give them what they deserved, just not in the way they expected. That was the day I began planning my revenge. I spent weeks carefully thinking about my next move. I didn't want to act impulsively. I wanted my revenge to be unforgettable. The first thing I did was look at the wedding plans. Claire was obsessed with luxury. She wanted a castle-like venue, a designer gown, rare flowers, a live orchestra, and the kind of reception people would brag about for years. It was a multi-million-dollar event, funded partly by my parents, who had poured their savings into making her day perfect. But it still wasn't enough. That's why they wanted Daniel's trust. I realized something deliciously ironic. They had already spread rumors among family and friends that I would be contributing Daniel's trust to the wedding as a gift. Everyone believed the money was coming. They had written me into their fairy tale, but I would turn it into their nightmare. I consulted with a lawyer to ensure I had full control over Daniel's trust. Then I started moving pieces into place. I booked a private investigator to dig into my parents' and Claire's financial dealings. If there was any dirt, I wanted it. And there was plenty debt, unpaid loans, and shady transactions. The more I uncovered, the angrier I became. My parents weren't just greedy. They were drowning financially, hoping Claire's wealthy in-laws would bail them out. This wedding wasn't about love, it was about money, image, and survival. So I decided I would attend the wedding. I would smile, dress beautifully, and let them think I was there to support them. And then, at the very moment they thought their dreams were coming true, I would burn it all down. My plan was simple, yet devastating. I prepared a speech, crafted carefully, laced with truths that no one could ignore. I would expose them in front of the entire wedding party, the in-laws, the guests, everyone who mattered. And I would do it in such a way that their reputation would never recover. Daniel's trust fund wouldn't buy a wedding. It would buy justice. The day of the wedding arrived. Claire looked radiant in her gown, my parents beaming with pride beside her. Guests were laughing, the orchestra was playing, and everything looked like a perfect fairy tale. I sat quietly, watching, waiting. My heart pounded with nerves, but also with purpose. When it was time for the speeches, my father proudly introduced Claire and her new husband. Glasses clinked, applause echoed, and then unexpectedly, he handed the microphone to me. Our Sophia has generously contributed Daniel's trust to this wedding, he announced smugly. She has shown us the meaning of family. The guests clapped. Claire smiled smugly. And that was my cue. I stood up, my hands steady as I took the microphone. Actually, I began, my voice calm but strong. There's been a misunderstanding. The room quieted. All eyes turned to me. I didn't give Daniel's trust to fund this wedding. In fact, I would never use his money for something so shallow. But since my parents decided to lie to all of you, I think you deserve the truth. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I went on. I exposed how my parents had skipped Daniel's funeral, how they had demanded his trust for this wedding, how they valued appearances over love. Then I revealed the financial dirt I'd uncovered, the debts, the lies, the manipulation. The room was stunned. Claire's new in-laws looked horrified. Her husband's face turned red with anger. The whispers began, spreading like wildfire. Claire screamed at me, "You ruined my wedding." I looked her straight in the eye. "No, you ruined it yourself by trying to steal from your dead nephew." With that, I placed the microphone down and walked out, my head high. Behind me, chaos erupted. Guests stormed out. The groom's family confronted my parents. Claire sobbed as her perfect day crumbled to dust, and for the first time since losing Daniel, I felt a sense of peace. The fallout was worse than I imagined for them, at least. Word spread quickly. Within days, everyone knew the truth about my parents and Claire. Their reputation in the community was destroyed. The groom's family canceled financial support, and Claire's marriage began to crumble almost immediately. My parents tried to call me, to scream at me, to guilt me, but I ignored every attempt. They made their choices. Now they were living with the consequences. Daniel's trust remained untouched, secure in his name. Eventually, I decided to use some of it for something meaningful, a scholarship fund in his memory. Each year, a child would receive help to pursue their dreams. Something Daniel never got the chance to do. As for me, I didn't emerge from this story unscathed. Grief never disappears, but I learned to carry it differently. I learned that revenge doesn't erase pain, but it can give justice. And justice can bring peace. My parents skipped my son's funeral, and they thought they could erase him from our lives. But in the end, it was their greed, their betrayal, and their lies that erased them from mine. And as I stood one evening by Daniel's grave, placing fresh flowers down, I whispered, "They'll never forget you now, my love. Your name, your memory, your justice, it lives on."